All right, if I can get everybody's attention, we're going to resume the afternoon session over here in the Okanagan room regarding the hemp conversation. As you heard this morning, we talked a little bit about introduction to hemp, the ABCs, as well as the decortication and the processing and how to get from the farm to the product you need to start building, which is the herd. From that stage, I want to introduce Mark Faber from Just Biofiber. They're out of Airdrie, Alberta. They specialize in hemp construction and have their own unique spin on it, and they've been doing their process of building homes for a number of years. Mark's worked for them for 3 years, and he's a construction manager for the hemp homes they build. And he's personally looked over 5 different hemp structures, so he's got lots of experience to help educate everybody here on how to take it from the raw product to get a finished home for your community. So with that, I'll ask Mark to come up. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. My name is Mark Faber, and I work with Just Biofiber Structural Solutions Corp. So we're in the business of producing hemp lime blocks for building residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. So I'm going to run you through basically the step-by-step process of how we make them and how we get them to site and how we turn them into a house or a commercial building. So let's get started. Where do I point at that? There you go. Okay. So these are what our hemp lime blocks look like. They have a scratch coat on them with lime and sand. But essentially it's hemp hurd, which you guys have been talking about today, chipped up into a consistent size and pressed or mixed with lime and then pressed into this Lego-shaped block. So I'm just going to show you a few pictures of 2 of the products we have, and then we'll go into the process. We also have a below-grade block. This is exactly the same size, the same shape, but instead of having hemp hurd, it's a foam product that is for below-grade purposes. We found that the hemp and lime needs to be worked with above grade. It needs to be a breathable wall system and have access to air to perform properly. So that's a brand new product that we're using for foundations. We've done a few homes now where we do all the below grade stuff and then backfill, and then the hemp lime starts up above grades. So anyways, here's a little bit about our product, the hemp lime product, which you guys are mostly interested in. So it's a modular building block system that is for fast, flexible construction. So it's about 21 inches by 8 inches high by 10 inches thick. It's a structural load-bearing block, and it's unique in that way because you can see the black frame that is internally inside the block. That takes up about 6% of the entire block, and about 94% of it is the hemp and the lime. So it's a small percentage, but it allows the block to take the structural load of the roof and the walls, or if you're putting beams on top of the walls, it'll handle that structural load. So the blocks being 10 inches thick and compressed in a certain density, they're coming out with an average of about R32 to these blocks, so performing really well. We've had higher readings come back in certain clear wall situations, but a lot of you know that different wall types have different R values depending on windows and time of day and time of year. We've determined that our blocks sequester about 6 kilograms of CO2 per block. That's captured atmospheric CO2. It's kind of a common statistic in the hemp world that hemp herd and the hemp stalks in the farms will absorb about 7 times more CO2 than forests and wood will. Lime formulation continues to absorb CO2 as well, so that's in our binder, as well as we coat these blocks once they're constructed with a lime exterior stucco. So it's an all-natural product, which is great. The blocks are non-toxic, no VOCs, and permeable. Once they're all put together, it creates a monolithic structure. So they're all basically welded together, glued together, and then you have one solid piece of stone, essentially. There's a high block alkalinity, so the hemp hurd itself is all coated fully in lime, so that protects it from mold and termites and insects causing problems around your house. We've done multiple tests, and one we're very proud of is a 2-hour fire rating. As you guys probably seen videos online and whatnot, where there's a flame shooting against the hemp lime blocks, and it holds up really well. So we've passed that in a professional third-party testing at Intertech. So that's got an ASTM number behind it, and we have multiple patents worldwide. So the block, this is the general ingredients of it, just so you guys can see, but it's essentially hemp hurd, which you guys are all familiar with. It's from an industrial hemp stock, so we're really focused on partnering with industrial hemp farmers. The taller the stalk, the better, the stronger the hemp hurd, better conditions for us to work with. There's an example of what the hemp hurd looks like. I have an actual block at the Green Futures table in the back right corner out there. If anybody wants to touch or see the block in person, you can see the type of herd we're looking for. And then there's a lime binder that we've formulated that we coat the hemp hurd with, and then press it into the block. And then the third ingredient, obviously, of our block is our structural frame. So that's kind of the internal structure of the whole thing. So you guys have talked today, I think, a lot about first growing the hemp. So like I said, we're looking to partner with industrial hemp farmers. It's going to be huge demand, we feel, in the future. So we'd like to build relationships with farmers all over the country in every region, and then grow good industrial hemp that we can use to press into blocks. Obviously, step 2 from the growing of the hemp is the decortication of it, and you guys have also, I understand, been talking about that today. So mobile decortication and factory decortication and whatnot. So it's going to be a huge industry coming up here where we have to process this hemp. And obviously we're after the hemp hurd. We want to purchase a lot of it to make these blocks. We have a lot of orders that we need to fulfill. So the more the better. And we also need guys to process it for us. So if you guys are doing the decortication, that would be great. I'd love to meet you and talk about that. So the next step is obviously our block production. So we're a company, we're 6 years old. We're based out of Airdrie, Alberta right now. That's where the founder is based and invented the block out of. And we have our first pilot facility there. It's 24,000 square feet. This is where we purchase the herd from the decortication plant, and then bring it here, and we mix the lime with the hemp herd, and we press it into our blocks in this facility. A little bit about the process of how we do that. We essentially have a tampering system that first we mix the hemp herd and the lime together into a consistent batch, and then we dump it into a block mold that creates a consistent size every single time. It's all about consistency when building and construction. We can't have varying size materials, so we get the same size block every time it comes out, and then we have to cure the block. So we dry that in a cure room. Only takes about 3 or 4 days, and then we can send it out to the building site. So it's a little bit about what we do. I have a short video here. I'm not sure, maybe some of you guys have seen this on CBC News, but our president, Terry Radford, gives a really good description and visual demonstration of our plant and tour. And so it's about 1.5 minutes long, so it'll be a quick one.
So you can put a flame directly on the material and it does not burn. No smoke, no flame spread. And if you feel the back of the material, as you can tell, I'm holding my hand on it, so there's no thermal transfer. Well, we manufacture sustainable building materials. And what we mean by sustainable is we use hemp and lime. Here in Alberta, there's an abundance of hemp that's already processed, and we have an abundance of lime as well. What we've developed is a structural block that does not require any cement or concrete or rebar. You simply stack the blocks up like Lego. There's an adhesive binder that goes between them, and you're done. The number one advantage to having a hemp building system is the indoor air quality and comfort for the occupants. So people living in the building, it regulates humidity, there's no mold that can grow, it's very warm and even temperatures, it's cooler in the summertime. It's basically just an ideal building material for interior comfort and air quality. When the plant grows, it absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and it's stored in the material of the plant itself as carbon. And so we capture about 6 kilos of CO2 per block in the actual material. So by the time the building is complete, it'll actually have a negative carbon footprint because of using our materials. This is a pilot facility, and we're working towards commercial production.
So that man speaking is Terry Radford. He's our president once again. And so if anybody has questions about growing the hemp and what kind of hemp strains that you are looking to do to grow this type of product, he's the man to talk to. He's well educated in all the agricultural parts of our company, basically. So I can get you his phone number and contact and email, and you guys can always give him a shout and talk to about partnering as far as growing the product, and as well doing decortication and then even construction and building with it. So I'll keep going on with a little bit of description about how it all works. So obviously there's a lot of things that have to be done to approve the building product and certify it for national building code and provincial standards, educating the local inspectors on how it works so that it meets local building codes. So we've had to go through a number of tests and invest a lot of money to prove that this product is performing. So we do most of our product testing at Intertech, which is in Vancouver. There's a number of facilities in the United States that do seismic testing and thermal performance testing and whatnot. So we've got pretty much everything done, and it's all passing with flying colors. So this hemp lime product is a great thing. Just an example, here's our fire test. We shot flames at it for 2 hours, and the top right picture there is when it came out after an hour. The hemp and the lime was barely affected. So after 2 hours, it pretty much looked the same way. Some of the lime plaster, the scratch coat was peeling just a little bit, but the wall was still intact. So, in the event of forest fires or building fires or whatnot, your structure is still going to stay standing and not fall down on you. So we actually even took it the next level, and our structural frames, we shot 35 psi water at those just to remove all the hemp and the lime, just to ensure that structural frame was still intact, and it was fully. So that's holding up your roof and your floor joists and whatever if you're trapped in your basement or something like that. So that was really positive results. We're really happy about that. There's just a number of lists of tests that we've gone through in past and achieved ASTM numbers. So architects and designers are able to pull these specs and design their buildings around the proven ASTM numbers. Building officials and inspectors have seen that it's proven itself, I guess, to meet their codes. Some other attributes is that we've done compressive testing, and these structural frames can take. They've come up with a 75 MPa structural load reading. So really high amounts of weight can be put on top of these walls. We believe that we can go up to 5 or 6 stories high based on the test results from these frames. Like I said before, the insulation value is around R32. Smoke development and flame spreads all come back at 0. Really good sound absorption in these rooms that we've built. The sound does not travel. It's very quiet. And obviously the big question of price of building, we're coming in around $35 a square foot of wall space to build these structures. So we're really close and competitive with other building systems out there. Obviously, the more we can make of this, the more we can grow and bring down our costs, the better. So that's the ultimate goal, to make it affordable for everybody. So obviously, the last step of the whole process is construction and sales. So we're looking to build more facilities in different provinces and sell to people locally, not have to ship across the country, can create more emissions that way. So the shorter distance, the better. So I'm a construction manager with the company. I've built this home and the rest of them. With the process that we're doing so far is we're sending one of our trained guys out to work with the builder on site, him and his team, and we'll coach that builder until he's fully comfortable on how to build with the system. And then he'll be a certified block installer, and then he can take it from there and build homes and commercial and whatnot on his own. So we really want to ensure that we give a detailed description of how to put it all together before you're working on your own. We'll also have instructional videos step by step, so you can go back and reference how to build with it. Really make it easy for everybody. So obviously the Lego design around it is something that everybody's worked with as a child and played with young ones. So it's truly a really simple product to work with based on my experience. So how do we differ from some other methods of working with hemp and lime? And it's mainly because of our structural frame. It's really what we're trying to do is simplify the process of building with it and not have any delays. So traditional hempcrete, it 100% works just fine. You'll have to put forms and pack hemp hurd and lime into a structural framed house, basically. And so that process has been done for 20, 30 years at least, working great. We've just taken it a next step and put this structural frame in. And then the difference, well, some of the differences here is that it's delivered to site fully cured and dry. So you can build with it right away. Once you're done building your wall, you can finish it immediately. You're not having to wait for the internal ingredients to dry with a wet site mix. We ship it to site tarped in a breathable building wrap. You're not having to mix the binder and the hurd on site and worry about consistency every time. It's the same block, the same consistency in every batch. There's no structural framing and forming like I talked about. There's no tamping of the hurd. No delays waiting for the walls to cure. You can install the plaster right away, and it's just easy to learn how to work with, like a Lego system. So Some of the markets that we're looking to work with is industrial, commercial, residential, sound walls, demising walls, institution buildings, fire-rated walls and barrier walls. I even had a gentleman come and approach me the other day with the foam blocks, and he's like, we build movie sets all the time, and we're tired of doing it with cinder blocks and building materials that we have to throw away and are really heavy, and so these foam blocks look like they're really lightweight, and I can just put them together like Lego and then take them apart and reuse them, and absolutely. So we might even get into the movies, but you never know. We didn't even think of that when we were starting it, but some of the projects, a lot of people are wondering, well, what does a hemp house or block house look like? So it can look, have any finish that a traditional house does. You can put siding on it, you can plaster it and stucco it. This has a stucco finish on it with this defined texture. This one's in Souk, BC. That's a construction phase of it. I have a movie clip that I'm not going to show you, but if you guys are curious online, there's a tour of this home on Global News Construction, and the homeowner walks you right through the house if you want to see what the internal walls look like. Another place we've built on Cortez Island, what a beautiful place to work that was. The guys pretty much finished that one now. It's an example of how fast it goes together. There's 1,000 blocks in this simple workshop, just a square box, and you can put up a few 200 to 300 blocks a day with a small crew, and in about 5 days have your garage built. And so some of the steps I guess we're trying to simplify as far as the building process is, it's an all-in-one step where it's replacing for example, your exterior sheeting, your framing, your insulation, your bat insulation, your vapor barrier, and then your drywall. So there's 5 or 6 steps there that we have all in one step. So hopefully that makes it easier to build with. Here's another project we have in Victoria that I'm working on currently. I'm just in between floors, so that's how I was able to make it today. And if anybody ever wants a tour and you're in Victoria, you can give us a call and you can see a project under construction. Explain the process in person if you like. I'm out there probably most of December and January, so you can get my contact if you like. When you purchase the blocks, if you need to learn how to work with it as well, we've had a general manual that we'll send to you so that you can have a full overview of how to work with it. So that's something that I can get anybody here if they request it. I won't go through the 30 pages there. We're just in the process of finalizing some financing for working with this Ecolock project here in Kelowna. We're really excited to do that one. It's a 4-story building, and so it'd really be a good start in the Okanagan here. A lot of good green features there. So anyways, some of the articles that we've had in Bloomberg and New York Times are on the slideshow. If anybody's interested in reading, and Hemp Magazine. And the last point I'm going to discuss is the recycling of the blocks. We have an architect that works in-house that helps you design your projects so that there's as little waste as possible. We don't want to be throwing anything in the garbage. So we design the houses around being full blocks and half blocks or quarter blocks and not offcuts, so that you're ending up with a lot of waste going in the landfill. So the hemp hurd and lime can be composted into the ground. So the houses we've built, we've just broken it up and put it in the garden, and it creates good rich soil. And then the frames we'll bring back to our factory, and we'll go through a recycling process. So no waste. So that's about it for me today. If anybody has any questions, I can answer a few here, and then I'm going to stick around in the back there and answer any at the back Green Futures table there. So thanks very much. You good? Thanks.
Was there a couple of questions that somebody wanted to ask?
Thank you. The question is, are you applying some sort of mortar between the blocks as you're building them up?
Yes, there's a lime and flax mortar, actually. We use a combination of hydrated and hydraulic lime. And flax is a filler that's just a finer, oily material that is able to be applicated easier than the hemp hurd, the larger, bulkier product, basically. So that's our mortar that if there is any air gap between the blocks, that closes it off and seals it so that you have a full airtight building.
And how are you doing electrical boxes, socket boxes, light switches, that sort of thing?
So you can see in the block I have out back, but there's holes every 6 inches in the center of the block, and that's an electrical conduit hole. So the wires are fished through that, and then you can simply cut the hemp and lime mix with a hand drywall saw or a Dremel tool or a Sawzall, whatever you choose. It's very easy to work with, and you just notch out where your block or your outlet's going to go, and then you screw right to the structural frame that's on the center of the block. Just takes a regular screw and mount your box that way. So.
And last is, how much is a ton of hurd? How much, if I were to sell hurd to you and I had, how much is it per ton?
That's a question for Terry Radford, and so I can get you his information, and he'd answer that in a heartbeat for you. So I don't, know that. Yeah.
Can I ask you what the dimensions are of those blocks and how much they weigh? I'm just curious.
Right. So the block is 21 inches roughly wide by 8 inches high and 10 and a half inches thick. It's designed around having those structural members on the inside of the block 16 inches on center. So if you end up putting sheets of 4x8 sheets of something on there or strapping, that you have essentially every 6 inches you have a structural member to screw to. But that's the size, and then the weight is roughly about 30 pounds. We actually have a light duty frame and a heavy duty frame. The light duty is for smaller projects, residential projects, and then the heavy duty frame, which is the black frame, is a little bit heavier, just a denser internal structure, and there's just a couple pounds more, so roughly around 30 pounds, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so majority of the products, we don't have any plumbing running through the exterior walls. It's all usually an internal mechanical room, and then that'll go through the ceiling or down through the floor. But if you had to do a stack or something like that, then you can easily notch out the block with a drywall handsaw or a Sawzall. It cuts really easily, so yeah.
Let's give it up for Mark here. Thank you, Mark. And it's always great. They're Just Biofiber. They've been working on promoting, and one more question on 2 there.
The hurd, why just hemp, other than the size of the plant?
Yeah, it's the best we've found to work with so far, the highest performance. We are exercising other materials as well that have come from other countries as suggestions, but it's just a matter of testing those and seeing their long-term lifespan, I guess, as a building product. So we're looking at other products. We've been asked about using the marijuana stalks, and we've just found that the industrial hemp stalks are the most ideal and longest lasting to work with to date. So we'll continue to test other things.
I'll also recommend that you ask the same question for our next presenter, who is an instructor in building with hempcrete as well as other eco-friendly building materials. So he'd have probably a more detailed answer on that as well. Again, Mark Faber from Just Biofiber. They've invested a lot of time and money in helping promoting and pushing hemp construction to the next level over a number of years. So, really grateful for them to be here. Again, he also has one of the blocks out on display in the back. You can always go touch and feel, pick up, feel the weight. And again, like you said, it's an easy Lego brick construction that can be done fairly quick and simple, which is perfect for, I know, the guys that I work with and in my community. You don't need a Red Seal carpenter to oversee everything. So it's a real simple community application. And he also said earlier that they're looking to buy herd to fill their orders. So if you're processing, maybe talk about a potential buyer. And if you're building, you got a potential seller as well for a unique and amazing building material. So again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Just Biofiber. And with that, we are going to transition into our next presentation. We have, I think he's going to be doing it via online. So I think they're just going to get that organized while I introduce Chris Magwood. He's from the Endeavour Sustainable Building School. In 1998, Chris built his family house. It was the first permitted straw bale house in Ontario. Through mistakes, he learned how straw bale building could be done better. He learned building systems. By 1999, he was building full-time, learning how to make natural building materials and renewable energy systems practical and efficient. In 2000, he co-authored the book Straw Bale Building. This was the first of 7 books he's written to date. In 2012, he helped to found the Endeavour Center, where he is an instructor and a curriculum developer. He proposed a curriculum for a sustainable building design and construction certificate program to Fleming College in 2005 and was the lead instructor for that program until 2011. His thesis, Opportunities for Carbon Capture and Storage in Building Materials, will be completed in early 2019. So I don't know if he's all set up there, but I've had the pleasure of meeting Chris and visiting his instructing his school out in Ontario. He's wrote a book on building with hempcrete. I think there's some available if you track down David Evans for sale. It's also online at the Endeavour Center. They're doing some amazing research with hemp and hemp building to help with these statistics that the building codes require, as well as other materials they're investigating. He also does courses and classes, and I know if you ask nicely, he can even come out and train your community on how to build with hemp. So keep that in mind, because it's always would be nice. I know we're planning on getting him out to our farm in the spring to help put on a construction course and build our first class and help train the builders of the future in our community. So I know, Chris is very passionate, very knowledgeable, and all-around great guy. So I don't know if it's up and running yet.
Well, I can hear everything you said. So
Okay.
If you can hear me, then that's great.
Yeah, we can hear you, Chris. So I'll let you take the floor, and your presentation, your PowerPoint's also on the screen for everybody to see. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thank you for that very kind introduction, and thanks to all the organizers for making this presentation work remotely like this. I'm sorry that I'm not there in the room with everybody, but for somebody whose life is centered around lowering the carbon footprint of buildings, it's nice to not have to fly for a half-hour presentation. So I appreciate your patience in hearing my disembodied voice and looking at my slides. So I wanted to sort of take a look at hemp construction in general. We do a lot of work with hempcrete, but also hemp in other forms. And as Stephen said, also other forms of natural building work. So how did my slides go forward? There we go. Okay, so I did get a little bit of an intro there. So I've had a really unique opportunity to be involved in sort of the modern resurgence of natural building since the late 1990s, and kind of by fluke, by wanting to build my own house for my family in a way that really respected the planet and was affordable and healthy for everybody. I was just sort of in the right place at the right time to do my own house. And then, you know, there's so much interest from people in wanting to build in this kind of way where it's, you know, we can be comfortable and not wrecking the planet at the same time. And so I've just had a great chance to work on so many different types of projects for so many different types of clients, including over the last few years, lots of First Nations here in Ontario. I find that really exciting, where, you know, my passion for natural materials and health and respect for the environment, it's just such a key part of, you know, what those communities are wanting for themselves too. So they've been really wonderful collaborations so far. My introduction to hemp as a building material came a few years into my career as a straw bale builder, when a local farmer, Grant Moorcroft, he lived just down the road from me, he gave me a call and said, hey, I just grew hemp. He was one of the first people to get a license in Ontario when it became legal. I just grew a bunch of hemp. You know, I've got the seeds drying, and I baled up all the straw, and I want to know if you could use this straw for your straw bale houses. And so I went and checked out the bales, and they were great for building bales. You got them nice and dense. The stalks were a good size. They were really strong, and we really enjoyed using them. So we ran those bales through a lot of testing programs, like we had other types of straw, and, you know, started to work with them just as straw bales, including, you can see that one photo in the middle, using the large round bales as structural columns for a performing arts center. That remains to this day the fastest, cheapest, simplest structural system I've ever implemented in my life. That was a good one. And just as a note, every time we made a hemp bale building, we also helped spread the plant, because there would still be seed left in the bales, and as we moved them around and opened them up, we scattered a lot of hemp plants across Ontario while we did that. So right now, there are two ways that we're building with hemp here at Endeavour. One is with hempcrete, the hemp lime mix, which Mark just sort of outlined, where we're taking a typical sort of frame wall structure and mixing the hemp and the lime binder together on site, packing it into forms, and then, you know, removing the forms and seeing either finishing the walls with a plaster or with some other kind of covering. But, you know, what most people sort of do with hempcrete. A couple years ago, we added hemp bats. The company MEM in Quebec is making this great hemp bat product now, and you can see a photo of that going into one of our buildings. So typically, those are the two ways that we're using hemp in our construction right now. And just to give you a sense of those two materials, the hempcrete, it's a wet mixed product. So we're taking hemp hurd and mixing it with a hydraulic line binder. And there's lots to know about the binders if you are really interested in hempcrete. I'm not going to go into depth on that right now, but feel free to reach out to me, or my book has lots of info on the binders. And what we've been finding is that the hempcrete is costing us between sort of $3.50 and $5 a cubic foot for material costs. And most of the difference in those prices has to do with shipping. Getting the herd sourced locally here in Ontario has been tough, so we've often been shipping it from Manitoba or Alberta, and so that definitely makes the cost go up. And we've been finding that a crew of 4 to 5 people can place somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 cubic feet per hour. And so that makes it pretty competitive with other insulation materials. The advantages of hempcrete, and Mark did a good job of sort of outlining some of these. Great fire retardancy, really the lime binder really inhibits mold growth. It's got some great moisture storage capacities. There's no sort of waste left on site. Everything can be recycled or composted. It can go in walls, roofs, and floors in various different types of mixes. And because it's using the hurd, that tends to be the part of the hemp plant that doesn't really have too many other uses. So for people growing it. It's sort of a chance to sell off that part of the plant that doesn't have much other sales value. The disadvantages of the sort of wet mixed hempcrete is that the materials are slightly higher cost, and Mark really nailed it, is the slow drying time. When we pack a building with hempcrete, we're looking at those walls having to sit, depending on the weather and the thickness of the walls and lots of other conditions, but anywhere from sort of 4 to 8 weeks before we can close that wall in. And while that's not necessarily, doesn't slow down the whole building process, you do really have to stage a wet packed hempcrete building in a particular way so that you can get that insulation in really early and then turn your attention to lots of interior work until the drying time, everything's dried through and you're ready to go. There's still some code hurdles around working with hempcrete, and I'll get into some of that a little bit later in this presentation. And the ingredients, there's sort of 3 key ingredients. There's the hemp hurd, and there is definitely some difficulty in not just sourcing that, but making sure that even if you can find somebody who's got it, that it's been ground to an appropriate particle size, that there's not, quite often we find that it comes too fine, and we're having to sort of sift it out and get to the bigger pieces that we want and get all the dust and fines out. The lime part is pretty easy to get from masonry supply places, but the ingredient that makes the lime set hydraulically is a pozzolan called metakaolin, or there are some other things that you can put in there. And that's not a typical construction material, so it does take a little bit of sourcing to find that material. The hemp bats, on the other hand, are less expensive, and they're just as fast to install as any other dry bat insulation. So the advantages of that material for us is that the price is really competitive, even though it's a very small company making it. It's only a little bit, about a dime a square foot more than something like, Roxol or something like that. So really competitively priced. The market sort of understands bat insulation. When you look at a hemp bat, it looks, the color is different, but the size and shape and what you do with it makes sense. So the installation's easy. Code people have a good time, pretty easy time wrapping their head around it. And of course it's dry, so you don't have any wait time on it. The disadvantages is that, the fiber, here we're using the fiber, and it's sort of a low value use for a potentially high value material. So that's one issue. Once there's enough supply, I don't think that'll be as big a deal, but it is competing for other uses for the fiber. And because it's a pre-manufactured product, you'd have to invest in manufacturing equipment to be able to make and supply the bats. And the bats are less fire and moisture resistant than the hempcrete. The big difference between the two is that the hempcrete, because of the lime, you get the sort of the great fire retardancy and the moisture storage capacity and the lack of mold growth. But by adding stone to your insulation, you lower the R value. So the bats are about R4 per inch, and the hempcrete's about R2 per inch. So you actually need twice as much of the hempcrete to achieve a similar R value. But you also lose some of that fire and moisture resistance when you move to the bat product. And because hemp fiber is pretty tough, these hemp bats can be a little tricky to cut and fit in sort of non-standard areas, whereas the wet packed hempcrete, no matter what the shape of the cavity or what kind of electrical box or pipe or something you're going around, you're just sort of wet packing it around that. Coming up really soon are some other ways of building with hemp, and it's great that you just got a talk from Just Biofiber. We're super excited about that product because a lot of those things that I rhymed off as disadvantages of building with the hempcrete The Just Biofiber really solves those. You don't have to be building a frame, you don't have to be building shutters, you don't have to be mixing on site, you don't have to be packing wet, and you don't have to be waiting for dry time. So there are so many advantages to having it in that prefabricated, precast block method. Super excited to start working with it in that way. But there are also companies just starting in North America to go into production of hemp panels. So 4x8 sheets of compressed hemp that you can use as for cabinetry, that you can use as wall finish, that you can use as countertops, all those sorts of uses. The Hemp Wood Company in the US, I just got my first samples of this stuff. It's pretty cool. It's a compressed hemp. They're selling it mostly as flooring, but again, you can be using it as trim, or basically in any other way that you use wood. And we just got our first piece of a siding product from Margent Farms in the UK, and they are doing a sort of corrugated siding product that's using hemp fiber and a hemp oil resin, and really excited about the notion that we could start actually finishing some of these buildings. To date, the hemp has all been in the walls, but really looking forward to being able to put it on floors and on interior walls and on siding, and really using it in more places. So, the most people who are interested in hemp, who want to build with it, they're really excited about the building part. And the building part, working with hemp is actually really easy. You could take a quick, 1-day lesson in hempcrete, and you've got it figured out. So that's not really where the work needs to go. That every material has a few tips and tricks, but this really isn't what's sort of slowing down the adoption of building this way, because it's all pretty easy to learn. But what is difficult is making widespread change in an industry that is really very conservative in its adoption of new ideas. And people say to me all the time, well, if all this stuff is so great, like how come we aren't all doing it now? And it's because it's new, and really almost everything in the world of hemp building is just at the point of crossing that first valley of death. This is an illustration that comes from a company that sort of trains startups in what to expect, and they sort of it's sort of common in the startup world to think of this valley of death where you can have this really good idea and develop it, and that's great, and then you sort of have to somehow leap over the valley of death where you're not selling anything, nothing's happening yet except your R&D, and get it to commercialization, and then you need to be able to leap a second valley of death where you have to get from, okay, this is a good idea and we've got a few demo projects out there, to lots of people are doing this and it's widely available. And the building market is a really tough one for that, because there isn't really much of a distribution network for small and medium-sized material manufacturers. Most things go from somebody builds at home or is doing it on a very sort of like owner-builder or one-off scale, and then your sort of next stop is basically Home Depot. And there's not a lot. Builders aren't used to sourcing materials from small independent manufacturers, or having to search things out like that. So all of these products are great, but getting them into the hands of a lot of people is the real work. So what I kind of want to look at is what we all can do sort of collectively to make that start to happen, to take us from where we are now, which is that we know these products are really great. We know all the benefits, and we know how to actually put them into use. We know the buildings function. We know all the easy stuff, but what will make the sort of transition to the market a little bit easier to handle. And so I think, for all the types of materials that are out there, so the hempcrete, the bats, the wood, the panels, all of that kind of stuff, we really need to make sure that our data is sound. And, it's so great to have a company like Just Biofiber investing for their product in this kind of stuff, because quite often that's lacking. We work with a lot of products that are sort of in the early stages, and they're just not investing in the sort of testing and support data that you really need. So getting that done, investing in life cycle analysis and environmental product declarations, and I'll show that on another slide. Being really honest about costs. When you are working with materials that aren't conventional and that are sort of at this development stage, it does sometimes cost more, sometimes not a whole lot more. It can cost less, but often just the fact that it is an unusual material is going to add some cost. You're going to have to, at the very least, be paying for shipping. You might be having to pay for somebody to get you an alternative compliance package together for your building department. You might have to hire an engineer to sort of back up some of the claims that are being made. There are potential costs that if we're honest and straightforward about those, and don't try to sell it as a less expensive thing if it's not a less expensive thing yet. I think that's good. And making sure that the building science and all these things is really sound, that we know what's going to happen when they get wet. We know what's going to happen if they something tries to light them on fire. We know that they're going to last when they're put into a building. Environmental product declarations they've been around for a while, but they're starting to really get used a lot in the building industry now. And what an environmental product declaration is, it's a report that a third party does for a manufacturer. So a manufacturer hires a company to review their entire product cycle and basically give you a report that says what your global warming potential is, so the effect on the climate, acidification, eutrophication, ozone, depletion of resources, all of that kind of stuff. And it gives you a chance to be able to compare materials, really accurately to each other. And a lot of the materials that we're looking at that use hemp or other agricultural fibers in them, they stack up incredibly well. Like they tend to store more carbon in the material than was emitted in making it, which is an incredible thing for climate change. Like that alone should be driving mountains of business, to this type of building. But they also tend to just be healthier materials, healthier for the people in the building, healthier for the planet, healthier at the end of life stage, and investing in an environmental product declaration, it really shows that. And when you compare, the numbers, this is IsoHemp. They're a hemp prefab company in France. There's nothing on the market that comes close to looking as good as this by the numbers. But these numbers need to show up in the places where architects and builders look for them, or nobody knows that we're there. And also showing up in various certification programs is really good. So, mostly what drives innovative products like these is the architects and the builders and the homeowners who really want to be doing the best things possible for the planet and themselves. And what those people do is go to things like the Declare program or Cradle to Cradle or the Health Product Declaration website, and look to see, well, what's really good there. And again, it's great to see this is the Declare label for the Just Biofiber block. But when people are really seeking out the best products, these are the places they're going to find out what's out there. And the more of these things that can show up, then the more likely people are to try them out. We also need to make sure that people know how to do this stuff. So whether that's coming up with certifications for installers or just developing training programs, working with colleges, working with apprentices, you know, even just having people, you know, in communities trained to do this. That's a really key part, because that's happened a lot here in Ontario with straw bale building. Is, you know, a few builders got a lot of attention and suddenly all kinds of people wanted a straw bale house, and literally, you know, the demand way outstripped the number of people who could actually supply those buildings. And, you know, people don't want to wait 2 or 3 or 4 years for a builder to become free to take their job. They'll just go elsewhere. So making sure that there's enough people who can do this is really important. And the code side of things can be tricky. Our codes in Canada now have this thing called the Alternative Compliance Pathway, and it's sort of a standardized way that building departments can look at you know, materials that don't show up in the code or aren't yet recognized in the code. And we've gotten you know, all our hempcrete projects here in Ontario through codes by getting really good at writing these alternative solutions packages. And so you know, from the material supplier end of things, you know, if you're trying to get people to use your product, having this kind of, you know, a pre-made alternative compliance package can be really helpful. And I think again, we really need to then, while things are in early stage, make sure that we're making really good debt projects. Nothing crushes a new idea like a failed building. Even if the idea was good, you know, we had that with straw bale. Some homeowner builders in the late 90s and early 2000s botched their projects, and they did things that would have wrecked any kind of building, no matter how you build it, because they just weren't knowledgeable enough to be building a house in the first place. But you know, when something goes wrong with a straw bale house or a hempcrete house, that's what makes the news. You know, it's that, well, this material must be really flawed, or you know, it must not work well. So I think we really need to make sure that the early buildings that get done well, and that the claims that we want to make about them, like, oh, you know, this kind of house is really great on energy, or it's really great for indoor air quality. If we actually can measure those things, if we can actually, you know, show people real examples of the fuel bills or the air tightness results or an indoor air quality test, that goes a long way, rather than just saying it's great, being able to actually prove it with real data. And then, yeah, I think although I love hemp and I love building with hemp, and I think it has a lot of great you know, aspects as a crop as well as a building material, there are lots and lots and lots of materials out there that sort of meet the same thresholds of being good for the planet, being good for people's health, and being good for the climate. And to, you know, I would sort of encourage you to explore hemp, and if that's really, you know, what you're growing or what you want to work with, then pursue that. But know that there are lots of other options out there that you know, give you very similar results in terms of the final product of the building. And some are just more appropriate for different regions. And you know, here's an example. We had to stop doing hempcrete for a couple of years because we just couldn't find a reliable source of hemp here in Ontario. So we turned to sunflower stalks, and we realized that there are actually quite a few sunflower growers here who don't do anything with their stalks. And when we chipped up their stalks, which you can do without a decorticator because there's no fiber on them, we got a material that was, you know, pretty much identical in terms of density and performance to hemp, but we could get it locally. So this is not to say we shouldn't be using hemp, but just that there are, you know, appropriate resources in appropriate areas, and where something's available, you know, I would encourage you to use the thing that is available. And if that happens to be hemp, then hemp is a really great choice. But there are other choices out there. And just to sort of show, Mark showed us a slide about the hempcrete being carbon storing. This is, I did a study, I looked at all kinds of different, in this case, wall systems and their carbon footprint, and all the ones that are sort of in green boxes all store more carbon than was emitted in making them. And the one that's circled there is our sort of typical hempcrete wall. So you can see it does a great job of storing carbon. It's not the best in that way because there's a carbon footprint to using that line binder that you don't have with some of the other plant-based insulations. But it does bring some advantages in terms of, fire resistance and things like that. But, this is something that we really in this field need to be trumpeting widely, is that there's all these options and they're all great. They all, literally reverse climate change rather than cause it. And just, to give you a sense of the scale of that, if all US homes were built, say, out of hempcrete, instead of emitting 15 coal plants worth of emissions every year just to make the materials, they'd be storing the equivalent of the emissions from 10 coal plants. So here in Ontario, we took 6 coal plants offline a few years ago, and it was the single biggest drop in emissions in North America. And the building industry has the chance to do that on an annual basis. So, if we really can push this, it really does make a big difference. So yeah, just sort of, to wrap up, I think in general, with hemp building and with building with waste fibers in general, we have something that is really important and special for the world at this point. Building in this way sort of really develops community. It makes buildings affordable and high performance, and helps the climate, and is good for the people in the building. So, we have all of those advantages, and what we really need to do is start just doing more of it and making it a more normal thing to do. And as we do that, I think it's really important that there are things about materials that make buildings really great, but there are also, wider things that we could be doing as builders, so that we're not just working with great materials, but that we're creating collaborations with the foresters and the farmers whose products we're using, so that we're actually, directly supporting those people who work in those industries. Things like using renewable energy to build on site, making sure that our crews and the people who actually make the buildings are diverse, that we're not just limiting it to the people who've typically been our builders, and thinking really carefully about waste as we build as well. So all of these things kind of come together to make a really complete package for building in a healthy way. I'll just skip that. So this is to sort of wrap up. This is kind of my 10 points of what sort of drives me and our practice here at Endeavour. I won't read through them all for everybody. You can take a quick scan of them, but I feel like if this is something that the majority of builders were on board with, we'd be creating a pretty different world from the one we have now. And I will wrap up there. I do have some books. I think the hempcrete one is probably there on site. But if you are interested in more information, or checking out what we have in the way of learning opportunities or training that we can bring to your site, you can reach me at those coordinates there. And I guess I will wrap up and assume that there are still some people in the room, because I can't tell who's there or if everybody's fallen asleep yet or not. But no. Thank you very much.
See a lot of phones out taking pictures there, Chris. Thank you very much. Give it a round of applause for Chris Magwood. Chris, you gave us a lot to think about on not just hemp and building, but all sustainable materials and all these other options that you showed. I know when I was at Chris's facility in Ontario, he showed me the sunflower blocks they were working out, and that was very, very interesting. I actually grew a little bit of sunflower actually after I saw him to see what kind of stuff I'd get out of it. So I'll share that with you, Chris, after we're done working with that. But yeah, thank you again. Great information. His book is out there. I recommend if you're interested in building with it to buy it. There's all the information he was talking about, from mixes and ratios to where to get supplies to how to design your house, things to watch out for. So filled with good information and practical information for anybody thinking of doing projects on your reserve. And yeah, he showed right there that small crews and anybody can start building in the natural area. It's going to take, there's leaders in here from all over the country, from all these different nations represented, from BC to all the way to Quebec and the East Coast. And it's our jobs as leaders to bring these ideas and help rebuild our communities using alternative motives and protecting what the Mother Earth gives us. So again, thank you, Chris, and next time, hopefully you'll be we'll be out there. I don't know which should be easier, if 100 people on a plane or maybe you next time, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would love that to happen. And yeah, if people's, people in communities do, are interested in training or just sort of talking more, I'm really, I'm excited by what I see going on and would love to be involved.
Yes. So one more thing, I'll open it up for questions. If anybody had any questions for Chris, all right, it must be getting late in the day, Chris. I think everybody's good on questions today. So again, thank you. A big round of applause for Chris Magwood. All right, so we'll move along in the hemp sector, but we're going to switch it up a little bit from the building. We're going to bring in Warren D. Cudney he's the CEO of Wahupta Ventures. It's recognized as a leader in corporate startups and as a speaker in the field of health and wellness, most recently specializing in the emerging hemp and CBD oil and isolate industry throughout North America and the world. As a top C-level strategist in the field, Warren is intimately involved with strategic planning and implementation, as well as acting as a key team player in managing this highly specialized field from genetics to finished product development. He is devoted to industry-leading quality control, ensuring that the team vision and corporate goals are continuously met, and creating an environment that ensures excellence in the industry. Oh, there he is hiding under the lights there. So without further ado, here's Warren. So give a round of applause for Warren.
Thank you very much. So our topic today is going to talk a little bit about the biomass. As the long introduction stated, we'll have to do something about that. I'm not all of that, but I guess what I'd like to do is start with an introduction of Wahupta and what we're all about and where we came from, just to give you a bit of a background, give you a bit of an understanding of who's involved in our organization and why. And then we can talk about biomass and some of the limited abilities to move that biomass in terms of the flower. I think there's been a lot of people that have added a tremendous amount of value in terms of herd and fiber and the markets that are emerging there. There's still some time to come, I think, till those mature. But to help you understand, if you're getting into hemp farming, I'm going to back up a little bit before we get to the actual biomass sale and just talk a little bit about it from a standpoint of some of the pitfalls, challenges, and the things that you have to look at becoming a farmer and growing the plant, and the romantic, I think, and tremendous opportunity of it all, and just talk a little bit about some of the things that can happen. So first of all, thank you very much for allowing us to be here and to be a part of this. We've had the opportunity to be at RES conference in Las Vegas for a couple of years, and it's always just I think a tremendous opportunity to try and work together and collaborate. We never work as consultants, paid consultants to First Nations. We really want to collaborate and try and help First Nations understand and bring some of the information that we have and certainly our Rolodex and our database and try and help bring projects to light and help move things forward. So if there's anything I say or if there's anything that you have questions on later, I would be happy to try and help you or guide you. And certainly it's been a lot of fun talking to a lot of the leadership and hearing about the projects that you have, that you're working on in your own communities. So congratulations for that. The tie for us for First Nations is we have several people. We have 3 people on our board of directors. One, Wayland Sutherland from Manitoba First Nations, Sam Anderson from Manitoba as well, and a young lady by the name of Chantel Watts from here in British Columbia. And her driver's a little bit different. She works with youth that are autistic and challenged, and she's trying to find ways to utilize the plants and those medicines to try and help some of them and mitigate some of the challenges those children have. So that's the driver. So 3 of our 5 board of directors are First Nations. A brief corporate structure of our company. We do have hemp farming assets. We also have partnerships with several First Nations. Some of them are here today, other ones that are emerging and we're working with for projects for next year, and we're tremendously excited about. We're located, those farms are located in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. At this point, we'll be expanding into Quebec and onto Ontario as well. And anyone that wants to talk about it, we'd be happy to look at some partnerships or opportunities with you as well. We also have a manufacturing division that we've acquired where we make, as you may have seen a couple of times walking in, the big cappuccino machine or the hookah bong, as I called it. I heard it called a few times, but our butane reactors that are out there. So we manufacture butane, very specialized butane extraction equipment for hemp and for cannabis. As well, we work on a proprietary alcohol-based extraction system. And the newest one that we're working on right now is hydromineralized suspended treated extraction. And that's a really fancy word for we take water, mineralized water, we change the molecular structure of that water, and we use that water to pull the oils out without any of the caustic problems or the solvents that we're using. So anybody that really understands extraction, once you've extracted that plant, you've got to take those solvents out. And that's a problem. And plus we're using chemicals to pull those oils out. Although that's used across this country and many others, for a lot of the oils we use today, it's maybe not the best solution. So we're working towards some really cool alternatives. When you finish pulling those oils out, you still have those solvents in that base. So you have to somehow take those out, and that's done through distillation, which is a secondary and complicated and can be expensive way to do it. With this new technology that we're getting towards, and I'm not touting it to sell it, but just to help you understand where we're going with technology, water and oil simply separate. They do it for us. So in this particular case, rather than post-extraction having to worry about distilling something, you let it settle and it separates itself. So those are some of the things that we're working on in terms of the CBD, CBG, and the oil side of things. We also work very closely globally with a lot of different projects. One of our projects that we're involved in with our division called Milagro, which is in Colombia, involves a genetics opportunity, but we also work with First Nations there. 10% of all of our profits go back to the First Nations of Colombia. We were drawn to that project simply because of that. There are a lot of the larger cannabis companies that were invited to talk to them about it, and one of their key drivers was if they removed the clause that 10% went back to First Nations communities in that country, they would step in and be a part of it. And that was just a non-starter for this particular company. We came to them. We didn't have the assets that some of those big cannabis companies had, but we had the same belief system, so we're involved in that. And we're really excited about that. That one involves being a large pharmaceutical laboratory where all of the biomass of these very small indigenous farmers are coming across state lines. It's the only facility in Colombia that you can actually ship to. We're working with them to have small extractors on site, and then they can send some of that crude oil for further refinement. So we're also working on projects in Mexico. We're the first company involved in a partnership in Ecuador from seed all the way to oil extraction and then exportation. And that one's fairly fresh and new, and that is with a company called Canamo. Some of the benefits in some of these extraction facilities and some of the downfalls can be something called C1D1. And I've talked to a lot of folks here today and certainly across the last couple of years, and we're talking about First Nations, sovereign nations, and setting up your own community resolutions, setting up your own legislation, and deciding how you're going to run your own businesses. And for me, I think that's really, really powerful, and I think the opportunities are strong. And we've got a partner here in the room that makes some of the best candies, I think. If you're a consumer of candies, Dwayne over here, he's been in this business a long time, and he really brings a lot of value to the projects as well. And he does a lot of extraction. If you're getting into that side of the business, he's been working with Chief Ira for a while now. And they're looking at some tremendous projects, all the way from growing the hemp to extracting the hemp, all the way to finished products and dispensation. So I think there's a lot of powerful opportunities coming. And I know Health Canada and probably some of our provincial legislators are here, and I'm certainly not speaking to tell you how to do things, but I know that the groups that are doing things outside of the realm of Health Canada, but taking a look at what those guidelines are and trying to do things even more robust, I think it's a benefit, and I think it takes a lot of leadership and skill to do that, and I think it takes some courage to be that pioneer, so congratulations to you all. One of the things that we noted was that in 2018, everybody got really excited in October because we finally had recreational cannabis, and there was going to be this big boom. And I don't know who follows the stock market, but I don't know that boom is really happening. So I think the leadership and what I've been hearing about vision and knowledge and collaboration and doing things in our own communities, I really look forward to that. And if there's something we can do to be a part of that or to help you or guide you, please come to us. That's what we're here for. Again, we're not paid consultants. We're not looking for a paycheck, but we're looking to try and move this ball forward. So anything we can do for that. One of the challenges you have when you become a hemp farmer is that hemp, as we know it, is industrial hemp here in Canada, and the cultivars that are on the Health Canada cultivar list really are very limited in terms of CBD production and furthermore minor cannabinoid production. When we talk about the oils, the buzz phrase is CBD. And although it's a very important component and it's one of the cannabinoids that we really want to look at, I think where we're going is to more robust, full plant profile oils, really pure full spectrum oils rather than isolating to that one molecule. So you want to start looking at those genetics. You want to be a part of having genetics that still meet that Health Canada threshold of 0.3. There's a lot of countries now, for instance, like Ecuador. We believe it'll be Mexico as well over the next 6 months that are going to go to 1%, which I think is a lot more responsible, gives us a lot of opportunity to bring in a lot more genetics. Hopefully Health Canada will start looking at that 0.3 threshold. I heard a story of the gentleman and the scientist that was involved in setting those parameters originally. And they approached him and they said, "Why did you make it 0.3%? Where did that come from?" And he said, "Honestly, it was a sidebar conversation. I just kind of off the cuff threw it out there, and really I'd like to retract it because if that became the standard, I made a big mistake." So we'd like to see some of those things changed. And if you're looking at your resolutions in your own community, I know that in speaking to a lot of communities, elders have a lot of reservation and hesitation about THC, and I understand that, and seeing it as a potential issue or a problem. But if we look at the hemp plant and the synergistic effect of all of those cannabinoids working as a medicine, there's a lot of genetics in other countries that we can bring here. And there are programs under research and development where you can bring a genetic in and do a test crop if it's got a lineage and support in another jurisdiction that Health Canada recognizes. And we're looking at bringing some of those seeds in, and those seeds are certainly not 1.5% or 2 or 3%, as a lot of the Canadian cultivars are, but they're higher in CBD. They're up into the teens. Some of them are 17% CBD. And when you're looking at an economic model, the economies of scale at 17% compared to 2% are clearly, there's a huge benefit in looking at that. The other things we're seeing are other cannabinoids like CBG, which is really the one that when you start digging into the science and research papers, and I know there's some people in science here, but you start looking at the benefits of CBG or THCV, If we can start bringing some of those genetics that have those higher profiles, I think we're really going to benefit from that. And I think that the people in this room and the leadership of this conference have the opportunity to really lead and show Health Canada how to do that. And I encourage you to do that. If there's ways that we can use outreach to do that, please let us know. And I know I've talked to a few that want to bring in their own genetics. I'm not a proponent to say we should go outside of Health Canada, but if you're choosing to do that in your own communities, I'd be happy to direct you to some really good, authentic people that can help you with that. One of the challenges that we all come across is that there's somebody wanting to take. And the problem is you try and reach out and educate yourselves and get into this industry, you're always going to have people that are looking for an opportunity to take from you. I'm happy to try and send you in the direction of people that want to give and want to move this movement forward. I have not been around the cannabis industry, and certainly for my lifetime have been someone that looked at the plant very differently. I looked at it as a drug rather than a medicine, and that was my own ignorance. I have learned through my own experiences and seen people healed through the use of the plant. And we have benefits. I know Chief Ira, we were talking last night at dinner and sharing a story of one of the people on our staff, and the person that runs Current Technologies, whose mother had been diagnosed with lung cancer that had gone to the brain, and was taken off of all Western medicine and was sent to hospice and given 48 hours to live. So no intervention from Western medicine, and that was a year and a half ago. She's left hospice twice. I get chills when I talk about it, and we know for a fact there is no challenge that it was the plant that helped save her. So rather than some of the drugs that we're using, there are alternatives, or there are ways to be able to use both Western medicine and the plant to help people. So we're a big proponent of that as well. So once you get to the point where you're a hemp farmer, you've decided what your genetics are, and you start to grow that crop, I guess the things I'd talk about is looking at the size of your acreage, understanding exactly how much biomass you're going to have, and what your absolute end objective is with that biomass. So when we talk about markets for purchasing and selling biomass, and we've talked, a few of us have talked about some biomass that they've been trying to sell, and I think we've been able to coordinate some markets maybe in the last couple of days for some of you as well, for buying and for selling. You really have to take a look at what that end game is, because before you make that investment in buying the hemp, growing the hemp, and taking those risks, yes, it's a weed, that's its name, it still has its challenges, but you want to make sure you understand where those markets are. And so from a Health Canada compliance standpoint, there really only are very few buyers of hemp in Canada, and those buyers are not only LPs, but they are standard processors as well. And those are the people that you're going to want to sell that biomass to. So my belief is that you want to start asking those questions and reaching out to those people and talking to them and saying, okay, if I grow 100 acres of hemp this year and the variety came out with this percentage, would you be a buyer of that biomass? And setting up some of those contracts before, or working those supply chains. If there's people that have nations that are doing their own processing, talking to those processors first and saying, what is it you're looking for in the hemp plant? I'm not as in tune with the rest of the plant and those markets. Certainly we've got some avenues, and we're working with some people that build out decortication plants for different levels of fiber, trying to capture all three of those: hurd, fiber, and the CBD-rich or cannabinoid-rich parts of the flower and leaves. But really understanding where you're going to go with that, because I think if you step into it, you really have to understand that although it's a lucrative market, there's a lot of money and great opportunity, and I do believe you should do it. It isn't as simple as it may look or people get excited about. If you don't have the right biomass, or that biomass profile isn't correct, or if you have some contamination, be it from heavy metals or from pesticides, I've seen some as recently as this week with salmonella. You have to be very aware that there are challenges and there is risk involved. It isn't that simple. So reach out to those people that are the buyers and understand from them what it is they're looking for in that biomass. That would be my biggest recommendation. Certainly we've got some channels, and if you want to reach out to us, we can certainly help you on that. We're in the midst of finishing, and hopefully by next week, we'll be a standard processor in partnership as well with one of our LP partners now. And we look to be involved in processing plants in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and British Columbia to begin with, and potentially Ontario. I think that the biggest problem we have now, and you can take a look at some articles out of the United States from last week where farmers had all shown up to a massive auction to sell their hemp. Really excited to finally take that money back, put it back into the till. And as we all know, farmers, they reach out and put tens of millions of dollars on the line with the bank. In the end result is they have to sell that biomass. They showed up at this auction and most of them went home with their hemp with no market for it. Here in Canada, if we had a 7 to 10% CBD biomass, that would be the unicorn, and we would be selling that all day long. And the high value of that is somewhere between $3.50 and potentially $5 per percentage point per pound. In the United States, if it's below 10%, no one will look at it. It's not worth the time. And that is because the volume of hemp compared to the number of processors just can't keep up. So that's something to consider, is understanding that you're in that supply chain and you're in that production channel before you grow your hemp. That would be one of the recommendations I would make. So I could probably go on in 10 different areas, and I certainly dabble in lots of areas of the industry, but that would be my recommendation. If you have channels for exportation, I know I've talked to a few folks that are looking at exporting from their nation to other areas. There are certainly buyers in other areas of the world that would look at that biomass. Some of the equipment that you've looked at and you've heard about, like decortication equipment, milling equipment, ways of pulling that plant apart in a usable way without damaging the flower or the trichomes and taking away some of the content of that oil. Those are all important components that you have to take a look at. Controlling that yourself. You don't want to leave that to a third party. There are just not enough people out there at this point doing it. So that's my quick synopsis of the industry. Again, if they have any questions now or later on, or certainly happy to pass on my cards for further discussions. We'd be extremely interested in having the conversations. Again, I'm excited to see that we've got people that have milling and decortication equipment and separation equipment, and people that are starting to take that next step in terms of other high-value products that we can make. BMW is now using exclusively the car mats that are in there are all made of hemp, door panels, front quarter panels on some cars. But these things are difficult to get to the raw materials to those particular channels. So anybody that's in the room that is buying that biomass is somebody that you as a farmer want to get to know and understand what form they want to take that in. So that would be my share for today. So thank you very much. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I won't take it personally. I'll just take it that I did a good job explaining it. You can, but that's the other thing. Genetics are really important, and we go back to that genetics question. And people that are making the products with hemp, the fiber can change. I'll give you an example. This year in Canada, there was a seed that is originally from Italy called Carminola. And Carminola is a great seed, great plant, very tall, more wispy, so you don't get quite the strength of it necessarily. But it's a 140-day cultivar, so you're going to have perfect conditions and have a perfect year to be able to get the yield from that and get the flower content. So all of it really is the plant is so useful, but really you have to take a look at what is it you're looking to grow that plant for. We changed on some of our farms this year, we did 6,200 acres, correct? 6,200 acres this year in 3 different provinces, and some of it was X59, some of it was Kitani, some of it was Katina. And all of them had differences. They're very hardy, all of them, but some of them had greater stalk. Some of them didn't have as big a flower. Some of them were producing probably below 2%. Some of them were close to 2% in CBD. If you're someone who's going to fractionate or take all of those molecules and separate them, so one of them had a beautiful CBG profile in it. So the differences in the plant, what are we using it for? And understand that before you grow it. The fiber? Yeah, I think I heard somebody else talk about it earlier. It's just not quite the same. The hemp plant and the cannabis plant and the stalk, the hurd, the fiber is just not quite the same. And again, it would depend on the variety, and you could probably find somebody in the room a lot more apt to talk to you about the difference. But I do know that we've talked about taking a lot of that waste byproduct from the cannabis plant, and it just doesn't apply for a lot of the applications that we want. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
So again, thank you, Warren. That was a lot of good information on the CBD side of growing hemp. I know we haven't heard too much about that here, and that is a big topic of conversation when I talk to a lot of farmers is getting into the CBD industry, especially when you might have minimal acres for cultivation. If you're under that, that 10 acres, 50 acres, but are looking to maximize your value. So a lot of good information, and I agree with Warren when he talks about, just knowing what you're growing for before you start growing, and choosing your varieties and how you grow based upon that, because there might be a lot of we all want to use every part, but if you're not able to produce it at a quality that's usable, then you're almost just wasting your time on it. And we heard from Jim today about making sure that fiber and the hurd are in the proper states, and making sure it's usable and retted properly before it's into decortication. We heard about the quality of hurd required just to use it in building material, and making sure it's done properly. And we heard a lot about the pros and a lot of cons this year that happened with the biomass and growing for flower, and getting your value worth. Because he talked about the sale that went down, and a lot of people's product they could not sell. And I've heard that from a lot of farmers who lost a lot of money expecting. They hear promises of $10,000 an acre and all these big numbers, but they weren't told about the realities of the drying systems and the harvesting, and their timelines before things start to deteriorate, or even how to get the maximum CBD out of their hemp. So those are things you need to do your research on, and make sure that you're doing the right thing and getting the right varieties, and you have the right equipment for those varieties. He mentioned Carmagnola about the longer drying times. There's been people that have grown that, and then they realized they had no way of harvesting such a big plant. So they just let it die in the field, because once it gets over a certain point, there's just no equipment on the market that can take it down properly. So these are all things people are working on. Great information. And so thank you again. Yeah, give everybody a round of applause. I forgot my agenda up here. I think I know we're getting late in the day. We're a little ahead of schedule. People have been running through the hemp information pretty quick. I know it can get kind of, we don't want to bore you up here. A lot of it's just plant information. It's not always as gets all the attention as cannabis does. But next, we're going to be talking about the proposed Indigenous Hemp Cooperative. So that's something Green Future Industries we've been talking about and want to bring forward regarding working together. We're not here to suggest how to work together or what the cooperative would how it would be formed. We just want to start talking about who wants to form one, how it would be formed, and what information or knowledge or products or processing is going to be involved, and how big of a scale of a cooperative you want to be a part of. Based off of feeling how the room is and everything. I think these discussions might be better one-on-one and walking around and chatting instead of at the microphone. So, I'm going to recommend maybe we take a little break, mingle with the people that presented today, find out more information to bring back to your communities and help potentially build. Oh, I also wanted to talk about Chris and this research and the need for it and the market. So when he was talking about the market and for hempcrete and building, he talked about the issues and building one or two houses here or there, and it's very difficult. I know a lot of you here, and I've talked with a lot of the communities across this nation. We are the market. And that's what I'll remind us. We are the market. I know more houses being built in First Nations communities in the next couple years than any other area. All these houses get the attention, but they're already overdeveloped. They're already expanded to the maximum of their borders. But once you go onto our reserves, you can see that we're starting from almost, depending what reserve, but ours is like the ground floor of building the homes. So when you think about how big the market is, we are the market of how big this industry is going to get. Across Canada, there's tens of billions of dollars in development that's going to be happening. And if there's going to be that much development, we might as well supply that development as well. So when you think about the market, look inward, not outward sometimes, because we develop a lot, we use a lot, and we can produce a lot. And the First Nation market is always underlooked. And it's time that we're not, and it's time that we got some respect when it comes to the bigger picture of things and the greater of Canada. So, when they start seeing 10, 20, 40, 50 homes being built out of hemp on each reserve, that's going to change some things and get people start looking, because I've always believed we were the market. I've always thought we were the market on this product. I'm not trying to sell it to Home Depot. I'm not trying to sell it to the contractor down the street. I'm trying to build my grandmother a house. That's what it comes down to for us. It's not about the profit. It's about our people, our community, and the environment. And I just want to reiterate that. And everybody have a nice little break and mingle and meet some people. Thank you.